Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger. I have the pleasure of having Matt Doyle here with me, who is the founder and CEO of Array. Matt, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what does Array do?
Hi, I'm Matt Doyle. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I'm originally from the UK, but I live here in Austin, Texas. And Array is digitization of like what would have been paper forms. And we tend to work in the operations and risk space. So we work with people like Walmart, we work with insurance companies, people doing kind of equipment inspection. So this is not something that Typeform could do or Jotform could do. This is kind of real world type paperwork replacement.
Interesting. How did that start? Like, were you in corporate world first and you're just like, this process sucks, and then you're like, I'm gonna start my own thing? Or is this like your eighth company and it's just the newest idea? Like, how did this even get started?
So I'm 39 now, and I've been self-employed full time since I was 23. And I started off in graphic design. So I was a UX UI designer, built e-commerce sites, and did a lot of the affiliate marketing stuff in that. If we had to work out the dates of that, that was where affiliate marketing was like pretty big. So I was in with a crew that was kind of like the ones that had really succeeded in London, like the ones that were doing well, were buying houses and fast cars and boats. And so they wanted to like elevate what they were doing. And I was making it better than their initial WordPress website. So I started there. But the problem is, and I thought that's what I always wanted to do, was like work as like an agency type thing. But then I realized that really the pleasure came in like when you had a bit more creative control. And so I originally started what came first? I started an e-commerce site because I built a lot of e-commerce sites. So I used Magento, and I built a custom website, and we did like a drop shipping style model with that, and it was a tennis company. And so we did like tennis rackets and tennis string. It was called stringitnow.com. And I wanted to build something that was like consumable items, so you could get repeat purchases, because that's obviously the problem with
Yeah.
e-commerce is you can drive traffic there, but why are they going to come back? I've got a friend of mine that has a very successful battery company selling batteries online, and that's where the idea came from of the importance of consumables. Then I built an app called The Big Day, and this was my foyer into building apps. So the idea I had again was, how can I build something that's not too heavy a lift, but it gives me it gets me started. And the Big Day was meant to be like a countdown app for your big day, your wedding, and it would
Oh,
help you make like little invitations for all the other little occasions coming up to the big day. So, we're going to do dress fitting. Oh, we're going to do a bachelorette party and things like that. It was a bit of fun. It was kind of cool. You could like make these little designs. In some way, it was ahead of its time because it was a little bit like Canva, not as good, but like it had the ideas of that. So I learned how to then make that. With that, I got invited to the Apple Developers Conference because we'd had quite a few downloads, and the Apple, and I was learning about pricing an app at that time, because there was either free apps or really expensive apps, and or do you do it really cheap and things like that. So I played around with that, and then during that time, I kind of got the bug for like, no, I need to be building a product, not just an e-commerce or something. So then I came up with the idea for what is today called Array. Originally, we were called launchcloud.com. And I got inspiration because all the way I'd been doing freelance design for people, I'd also been working for marketing agencies and PR agencies running events for them. So I would do field marketing events. If you've heard of that term, field marketing or experiential events,
yeah. Mhm.
experience, this experiment merged together. And
Yeah.
so I'd done jobs for um, loads of people. Coca-Cola was a noteworthy one. We did when the London Olympics was on, we did that. And so we were always going out and doing something like, okay, we did Coca-Cola for a long time. Coca-Cola was launching Coke Zero at the time in the UK. And I was an events manager, and I was tasked with going out, and I had a load of staff that were sampling the product. And at the end of the day, they would say to you, okay, how many cans did you give away? What were 10 pieces of customer feedback? What was this? What was that? And it was a nightmare. We also did a project for the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, and the Olympics. What those two shared in common is they actually tried to build an app. So what they would make you do in the other campaigns is go into what was it called? I'm forgetting the name now. Like one of these old form tools from back way, Wufoo forms, right? So we had to go to a Wufoo form and fill it in, and you're like, what was one thing someone said? And often we were making it up because it was like you just had a whole long day, gone back to the hotel, couldn't really think of anything. But the NHS people, they spent like £40,000 at the time on building this app. And all it did was take like first name. It was like to sign a petition. So it took like 4 fields, but they wanted it so that it would hold it offline and then send it. And then
Mm,
there was for the Olympics, there was lots of funding. We were working for Visa, and Visa had paid to have this massive app made, and it was the most buggy thing you could ever imagine. And that's the problem. Like, you can't build these things quickly and spin them up really quick because there's tons of testing that has to happen. So I had the idea is like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just drag and drop whatever variables you want and it would work offline in a mobile app? So whatever the campaign required, it's going to work. It's going to be field tested. And that's where the initial idea came from for Launch Cloud, now Array. So I went to field marketing companies and said, hey, if I built this, would you buy it? And a
yeah.
lot of people said
That's
yes.
smart.
Yeah.
The doing that kind of did you send like a big email out? Like how did you because that's a strategy that most people don't consider before building something is polling the audience, right? Just like do they even really want this, right? How did
Yeah.
you go about that process? Was it just a few phone calls or did you go big on that kind of poll or what?
No, I didn't go big on the outreach. Like, being someone who's in product, I feel like it sounds really smart and clever to survey 50,000 people or something. But actually, for the initial stages, there's a gut and a way to interpret that information. As a founder, it's very easy to get information overload and decide what to listen to and what not to listen to. So I had my base idea, and then I went and face-to-face interviewed people. So I had about 6, 7 big agencies who were doing stuff all the time. And so I went and talked to them and interviewed them, and I'd done some UX design on it. So I showed them visually how it was going to look when we built it. And they all liked it. But then it came down to, okay, how are we going to actually build this thing? Because with the e-commerce and the app, I'd self-funded. It wasn't crazy money. But this needed an iOS app, an Android app, an iPad app, an iPhone app. It needed a back-end system. It needed to synchronize the data. It was a heavy lift. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I can tell you what we did next if you want there. But that was like how we came up with the idea for Launch Cloud. But what we did is we did pivot a few years ago, 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, into more operations and risk. Because the problem we found with the Launch Cloud model is we ended up landing. We did Nintendo, we did Diageo, which is like they own Bailey's and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
we did Coca-Cola. We ended up doing Coca-Cola when it came back round again, and we did Coca-Cola for a few years. But it's very seasonal, that industry. That's the problem, right? There's a campaign on, it's all go go go, and then it's okay, campaign's over. And so I was like, well, that's not very sustainable. It's almost like an agency model again. So we found some early success within more operational use cases. So we started to pivot the company in that way. And then I moved to America, and we raised $1.3 million, and we retooled the product, rebranded it, reincorporated, took what we'd done in a Launch Cloud and foyered that into Array.
That's awesome. That's well, here's the thing. That's a great story, but
Yeah.
there is a piece missing.
Yeah.
There's no way it was all rainbows and unicorns. So, like, walk me through, and I'm just guessing, but I bet I'm right. At what point in your journey with Array did things just kind of go to shit for a minute? You know what I mean? Like at what point were you like, oh crap, like this may not work? Like there had to be something that went wrong. There always is. What were some of the struggles? You
There's more
clearly
than
made
one.
it, but
There's
yeah.
more than one, and we have a name for it. You just said it's a stroke. No, we call it the dark times. And so the
Yeah, the
dark
dark
times,
ages.
the dark times. So the first dark times, there was multiple. So I'm going to try and just pick out maybe some of the particularly
Yeah.
painful ones. And usually painful for me personally. I'm pretty tough, and that's a conclusion I've come to very recently. I deal with a lot of crap, and I'm like, yeah. Most people would like maybe buckle, be like, this is terrible. But I'm just like, all right, well, that sucks. Get up. Just before this started, what were we talking about? Martial arts, jujitsu,
Yeah.
being in sucky places for a long time. And I was, had that in me before I was training jujitsu about just being in the hard place longer than others could handle being in the hard place. And do you know what? Ultimately, that is what differentiates or separates the ones that succeed and the ones that don't. You shouldn't like do the definition of insanity and that's do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, but also hanging in there sometimes is what it takes. So one of the first dark times we had was we'd got a little bit of funding from one of these affiliate marketers I used to work with, we'd become friends, and he said, "Look, I can't give you a big lump of money, but I can give you some money just to fund the developer and get this thing going." And we'd got the initial kind of form building process in place, and we built an iOS app with an offshore team in. They were in Romania. We'd had a team in Romania doing it, and they were
Mhm.
fine. And we kind of had it working. Again, the challenge over a few years with that was offline syncing. Was no joke. It was no joke to get that working. Like the handshake has to be right. The data really has to be back at server side. Now it's battle tested. It's often something we bring up, but we got this client. It was Leah Burnett. They used to. I don't know if you heard of Leah Burnett. They're a famous American ad company. They're actually mentioned in like Mad Men, if you've ever seen that TV.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I
They're one
love
of the
that show. Love it.
OG like ad companies, but they have a big office in London. Somehow I got connected with them, and they used to have a field division. And then when we lost them as a customer was when they shut down their field division. It was called Arc Worldwide, and we were doing Bosch coffee machines, and they were all sold in. They're like, "Yeah, let's do this." I'm like, "Cool. All you need to do is use the web app or use the iPhone." And they're like, "Ah, no, we have a sponsorship with Samsung. Has to be Samsung." It's like,
Oh.
crap. So I went to the developers and said, "Guys, I know we've started the Android app, but how fast can we accelerate the build and get this thing done? Because our first big client, like we need to pull this off." And they thought they could. And it was the winter time in England, and we would just spend evenings walking in the rain and the dark because we had nowhere else to go, nowhere else to do, and we just walk, and it would just be letdown after letdown after letdown, and I had to go to the client with my tail between my legs, and this has happened a few times. So what I've said, we've messed up. We thought this partner that we have could pull this off. They haven't. But this is our plan to correct this issue. This is our timeline to correct this issue. And hopefully you'd be willing to be on that journey with us. And they were fine with it. Not,
Yeah,
they were.
communication is everything, right? I've always said like I don't have a problem with no or bad news. I have a problem with not knowing in time, right? Like don't tell me you can't, tell me how and how long. That's it, right? Like I know you can do it just because you
Uh,
could, the so no, I like that. That's a really good business, take on that too, is making sure that you're like, hey, we messed up. You take ownership for it. You give them the new plan, you give them the timeline, and you're humble enough to say, listen, I get it. If that's not acceptable, right? Like we get it, right? But hopefully you allow us. And I think what most people miss in that lesson is that you'd be surprised how many people will stick with you if you're just genuine and honest, and you are accountable. Accountability, that's the big one. So that's good. Good for you guys.
yeah, we did something like that once another time, which was to do with when we first got our ISO 27701 audit. We had a partner that we were working with to get us through the audit, and we couldn't get it done in the timescale we'd promised a big client. So that works really, really well, because it also demonstrates that you do know how to execute, like you said, and it convinces them you do and why it didn't work. And more often that does work, but in both these cases, it felt like that's it, it's over, because we've gone this far and we just finally landed a client, and now we slid right back down. In England, we call the game snakes and ladders. I think in America, it's snakes and shoots. Let's say,
Oh,
yeah, shoots and
shoots and
ladders.
ladders. Shoots and
Shoots and ladders.
ladders.
We've got
Yeah.
snakes and ladders, but shoots and ladders because you slide down snakes. So it
Yeah.
feels like, yeah, step, 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 step. Oh, hit a snake. Oh, hit a shoot, and you
Hmm.
and you go right back to square one. And yeah,
Yeah, no, that I think every entrepreneur has some version of that story, right? Because I've always said it's really funny. I've always said being a business owner is takes a level of psychosis and being really bad at math. Because if you knew the real stats of the odds of you succeeding, there's nothing else you would do in your life with those odds. If you went skydiving, they said, listen, there's like a 95% chance this chute is not going to open. You're not going to, a regular person's going to be like, absolutely not. But people like us, we're crazy. And we're like, wait, so you're saying there's a chance, right? So
uh,
we do it anyway, which is so stupid. But that's what it takes. It takes that, I always say, that level of psychosis, right?
yeah.
That,
I
that,
call it
del-
naivete, some
yeah.
naivety.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think as you go on, you've got to be careful not to lose that naivety, because
Yeah.
you kind of like what got you where you were was like, and there must be a better way to do it. There must be a faster way to do it. There must be. But then you can easily get fatigued and you can get complacent as the world goes on top of you, and you just don't want to be that
Yeah.
bitter entrepreneur. You want to
Yeah,
be that.
but you got to have a level of what I call delusional confidence, right? Because because otherwise, like you were saying, that relentless nature isn't gonna come in, right? Because if you're not confident, if you don't always think that you can solve the next problem, then you're gonna abandon the project and go do something else, right? And go get a job and answer
Mhm.
to someone who does get it, kind of thing,
And
right?
that's fine for some people. I know I say that startup or entrepreneurship's a full contact sport. When I was back in the UK, I was doing a lot with Virgin Startup, which is Richard Branson's startup accelerator type stuff. And I did their marketing strategy courses, their pitching and presenting courses, and I would do mentorship. So I've seen hundreds of entrepreneurs, and I now still advise for the NASDAQ Entrepreneur Center. And so, like, out of everybody I ever seen, it was like we were doing it like twice a month. There was like 30 entrepreneurs a night. And so I did the math for like 2 years, and
Mhm.
I know of 5 or 6 that were successful.
Yeah,
That now that I've got one owned a rum company, it's a successful rum company, stocks in all the shops and stuff like that.
yeah,
But hardly anyone makes it. I'm sure there's more
yeah.
that I didn't see all the way through, but there was certain shining stars I actually did see to go to success.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, let's talk about what maybe helped you guys along. So I'm a marketing guy by trade. I always like to say, what are you doing currently now from your, I mean, PR's one, you're on the podcast. Okay, PR check. What else do you guys do to get the word out about Array, and what types of marketing have you done that completely failed?
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a peer in our industry. So we don't call ourselves coolforms.com because we don't consider ourselves a form technology, but it's a very fundamental part of it. But not all forms are created equal. Like I said, type form is very different. Can't do what we do, like offline and the types of fields and stuff we collect and automation. So the problem is though, is that when you start doing PPC and you start targeting form technology, you're going to get caught in all that noise, which makes it very, very expensive. And it also means you're going to get a lot of false positives. People who think they can get it for free because a lot of those tools have freemium models. I spoke
Mhm.
to some of the team at Typeform actually when I was doing some research, and they actually have a name for their kind of customer base, which is the happy churner. They're super happy with what the company did and the product did. It just has now met its need, and that's it. The event is over. The whatever, right? And they just close the paid account. So we're not looking for those types of customers. We're looking for always on type people. And so we can get caught in the noise in PPC. Same with Gartner. If you're familiar with Gartner, they
Yeah.
do Get App and they do the other one. So that used to be okay for a bit. That used to work for a bit, but then the market generally is getting more and more saturated. I think PPC is getting more and more expensive, not just for our industry, but for everybody. You've kind of almost got to pay to play these days.
Mhm.
So we have found success. For us personally, it won't be the same for everybody, but in our industry, partnership community. So we work with Procore partnership teams, which is a big construction software out of the US. I don't know if you've heard of Procore before. And there's a couple of other companies like that. So we lean in deeper with their implementation partner network, and then we will help them more and help them get sort of do more deeper, exciting things with their clients. And we get to work on more exciting things like that. So how we engage that partnership community, how we communicate with them. So we were testing that. We tried a few attempts at it and had different varying successes. The other thing we did was target like trade associations, like the Trade Association of Property Inspectors or something like that. Some had better results than others, but we've really seen a vein with like picking a software company that has an active partner community that we can bolt onto and add value to that software. um, PandaDocs did that really well. If you're familiar with,
I love Panda. I use PandaDoc. I love
yeah,
PandaDoc.
I think it was like a year or two ago. We dealt with their team. They were interested in looking at acquiring us, and I don't think we weren't a good fit for them because they were looking for maybe how they could obviously buy a forms tool that was affordable, but we're more field based. And I said that to the founders. I said, like, if you're looking to buy a field based software, this could be good, but like if you're not, then it's a bit overkill, right?
Hmm.
And that was the conclusion we all came to. But PandaDocs did a really good go-to-market strategy, which was a deep integration with HubSpot, almost
Hmm.
exclusively, I think. And so it was like, hey, HubSpot does quotations, but if you want to make really sexy quotations, then you need PandaDocs. And we're like, hey, Procore or Next is another one we work with. Yeah, they do forms or checklists, but no, you're going to need something. If you need something a bit more heavyweight, offline, repeatable fields, video signature capability, you need array. And
Yeah.
that's where but we need to get that message across. We've found comes well from a trusted partner, because if someone's already chosen a partner, then they're going to listen to their advice.
True, true, very true. Well, in the spirit of the future of BizTech, uh, let's talk about goals. Like, where you guys headed? And like, if we were to have this conversation again in 12 months from right now,
Mm-hmm.
what would Array look like? Do you have some new tech or some new features coming down that you can give us a preview on? Is there growth goals you guys are trying to get to? What does 12 months out look like?
I tend to be a bit more of a product-led growth founder, and so everything has to lead to growth, obviously. But the sneak peek of what we're doing is we've been testing these reseller markets. We've been testing these softwares and their partnership networks, because we didn't want to jump into a vertical, because we've never really been super verticalized, which is a blessing and a curse, right? That's kind of the nature of forms in a way. But we've tested these other verticals. Construction has done well for us. Retail is good for us, and just general companies that doing inspection as a service. You have these big companies that inspect, or these trade associations. So that we found that. So there's there's a bit of a rebrand and a new website coming out soon. We've also completely redesigned the admin panel and the admin backend. And one of the main reasons for the website changes is to better position and message to that community. The admin differences and changes is, I want to refresh it a little bit as time's moved on. But the main thing is to gear it up for our AI stuff that we've been working on. So making sure there's a home for it to live and transact and output things for you. So we've got some exciting stuff that we've been working on. We already have in AI inside our system now, where you can take pictures of things and it will rip out the information, the text. So we're at the company in a country called Curacao, and all the car accident data in that country is done through our system. So we used to use OCR technology to scan a driving license, but now we use AI. So we've got that, and plus a lot of other things to automatically create forms, automatically create reports, automatically give you insight. But the UI needed to change to make home for this stuff, the homes for these things, and allow you to kind of input prompts, say, hey, this is a form, and this is what this form is. So the AI can be told what these things are.
That's cool. And then what do you think that might result in? I mean, do you guys have a goal of like doubling your revenue in the next 12 months, tripling, or is it like one of those like, steady as they go, 30% a year over a year kind of thing? Like, well, how do you guys like talk about that internally? What's your goals?
No, we would probably double the revenue, but more like 18 months, because we still got some build to do and stuff like that. So we're probably going to go to, so phase one, like I said, was testing bits in the market, and messaging and things that people want. And then the next part has been securing the reseller relationships and how certain ones are deeper than others, and contracts are in place. And then we're waiting to get things developed and put out there. And then the third phase will be, or the fourth phase will be like all out outreach. We might raise a little bit more capital to help us do that. But we'll see. Like right now, we've got resource that we need to execute on the first sort of point A, B, and C, but not maybe the big outreach.
That's awesome. That's huge. And it's such a small percentage of companies that can say that. So congratulations on your success and the hard work. Which actually brings me to my next question, which is this. If there was one piece of advice that you could give to a CEO or entrepreneur listening,
Yeah.
maybe they're in the struggle part of this roller coaster, right? And
Mhm.
and I will say we always know the never give up. So outside of the relentless nature that every entrepreneur knows they have to have,
Mhm.
what piece of advice outside of that would you give?
Well, I don't think. Okay, so the people at the very beginning is, so the little backstory is this. Like I said, I was working with Virgin, and I got to meet with Richard Branson a few times. And the very first time I ever met him, it was before I'd quit my full-time job, and he gave me a book. And he said, "Oh, what's your name?" Because he's going to write in it for you. And I said, "Oh, it was actually through the events companies that I was working with. I got to help him launch his book, Business Strip Bare." He always likes to have puns on nudity and stuff, or losing your virginity is one of the other ones. But
Yeah,
I said, "Oh, Matt, look, I want to jump out of this, into an entrepreneurship journey. what would you recommend? He said, Matt, you just got to do it. And he wrote, just do it and just go for it. And so that's one, you just got to take the leap in a lot of cases. And then the one about not giving up, I think the that is true, obviously, but all those tough times, usually, this is not my term, I don't even know if it's a real term, you've got to hug the cactus. You kind of got to do the hard thing. It might be
That sounds
late.
like a Texas term. You picked that up in
You hug
Texas.
that cactus, right? And so it's actually a Brit that told me it. It was a guy that
No
invested in
way,
us and a
man.
customer, and I told him about some hard times we were having. He's like, Matt, it sounds like you just need to hug the cactus. And so I was like, I think you're right. And so the hug the cactus is making the layoffs you don't most necessarily want to do. It's having the hard conversations with the customers. It's putting your foot down or holding the line on things where you're trying to be diplomatic, but you're like, dude, it's them or us, and we have to hug the cactus. You know?
I like that. Hug the cactus. I'm gonna remember that one. Where can the audience find you specifically? Because you never know who's listening, right? Maybe it's the next really big, partnership deal that you get. Where can they find you specifically? And then where can they find the company itself?
Yeah, so the company is buildarray.com. We might actually have a new domain with the new launch, but that's to be seen whether we launch with that new domain. But it's still going to be called Array. So buildarray.com. And you can find me on the social media channels. It's Matt A. Doyle on pretty much everything. So Matt, and then my middle name's Alan. So Matt A. Doyle. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. You can find me as Matthew Doyle on LinkedIn, and you'll see podcasts I do and the entrepreneurs that I interview. If you just want to hear more about my thoughts and people I talk to, or if you want to ask me a question, please message me.
Very cool. And listen, for everybody listening right now, if you like this episode, go ahead and follow, like it, share it, all the things, little bell stuff, whatever it is on the platform you're on, because that is how tech nerds like us find really cool podcasts like this. So, Matt, thank you so much for being
Thank you.
on, and I look forward to talking to you soon. We'll talk a little more about the jujitsu stuff from
Yeah.
before.
Thanks,
All
Matt.
right.
See ya.
Thank you.